Third, the unprecedented level of funding provided for the IIJA demands rigorous oversight and accountability. As stewards of taxpayers' dollars, we must ensure that these funds are used effectively and transparently, monitoring EPA's administration of funds and maximizing the public health impact of each dollar that is spent. Congressional oversight is especially crucial as we work to address emerging contaminants such as PFAS or forever chemicals, which require careful regulatory approaches that balance scientific rigor with practical feasibility for water systems nationwide. PFAS presents unique challenges because of its persistence in the environment. The EPA's proposal to classify certain PFAS as hazardous substances under CERCLA, though well-intentioned, would impose financial penalties on utilities that are tasked with cleaning up PFAS that they did not create and forcing unfair costs onto our local governments and ratepayers. To address this, Congress must exempt these entities, or they're called passive receivers, from CERCLA liability while holding manufacturers and primary contributors accountable. This balanced, science-based approach will allow water systems to prioritize their efforts on providing clean water. As we look to the future, the legacy of the Safe Drinking Water Act reminds us of the power of bipartisan cooperation, sound science, and shared responsibility across federal, state, and local governments. These values have been central to the Act's success and will continue to guide our efforts to strengthen and protect our nation's drinking water systems. As we focus on practical, evidence-based solutions, we honor the Act's spirit and renew our commitment to safe, reliable, and affordable drinking water for all Americans. In closing, I want to thank all of our federal, state, and local partners and the water professionals who work tirelessly to keep our water safety systems running safely. I look forward to our discussion today and working to advance our shared mission to protect and enhance America's drinking water. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Capito. And let me now recognize Senator Kelly, who's going to introduce our distinguished witness from the Navajo Nation. Senator Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to welcome to the committee the President of the Navajo Nation, Dr. Buu Nygren. President Nygren was elected President of the Navajo Nation in 2022. Upon his election, he made history as the youngest ever President of the Navajo Nation. Prior to his election as President, Dr. Nygren served as the Chief Commercial Officer of the Navajo Engineering and Construction Authority. He is a graduate of Arizona State University and has a doctorate from the University of Southern California. He and his wife, Jasmine, live in Red Mesa, Arizona. And I've had the honor of working closely with President Nygren on many of the issues that we will be discussing today, including exploring every opportunity to make sure that tribal households throughout the Navajo Nation have access to clean, reliable drinking water, but also cleaning up abandoned uranium mines and securing water rights for the Navajo Nation and other tribes and communities in northern Arizona. President Nygren, thank you for agreeing to testify in front of the committee today. I know that the committee is going to benefit from your experience as we discuss maximizing the investments made by the bipartisan infrastructure law to improve tribal water infrastructure, and also to get your perspective on what more that Congress can do to meet the needs of tribal communities. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kelly.
And I'll be back.
You bet. All right, next, I am pleased to welcome the Honorable Radhika Fox, former Assistant Administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Office of Water and current Principal of North Star Strategy. Radhika has more than 25 years of experience in executive management, policy, strategy, and operations. She has advanced policies, programs, and initiatives at the intersection of sustainability, infrastructure investment, environmental management, water resources, and environmental justice, and our economy. We're also joined today by Kathy Tucker-Vogel. Good morning. Public Water Supply Section Chief of the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. She has over 30 years of water sector experience in the state of Kansas. where she oversees the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund and the Water Operator Efficiency Programs, Water Operator Certification Programs. And now, I think we're ready to hear from you, Radhika, right? And Radhika Fox, welcome. It's great to see you. And we welcome you and thank you again for all of your service to our country.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito, and members of the committee. It's really a pleasure to be before you again. Ranking Member Capito, it's always lovely to see you, and it has been a pleasure working with you for several years now on a range of drinking water issues, PFAS, infrastructure investment. So it was great to see you again. Senator Carper, I just want to express my gratitude for your years of service, not only to your home state of Delaware, but to this nation, to the U.S. Senate, and to our environment. You are going to be deeply, deeply missed. So just 50 years ago.
Thank you very much. I'll grant you 5 or 10 more minutes to speak if you want.
Just 50 years ago, there were no national enforceable rules governing the safety of our drinking water. The drinking water that Americans relied on carried discarded chemicals, pesticides, fertilizers, and human waste, leading to high quality of their drinking water with the communities that they serve. The Safe Drinking Water Act, while many Americans don't even think about it, was truly a game changer in terms of our ability to protect the health and well-being of the American people. During my time at the EPA, I had the honor of working very closely with this committee to continue to make progress for the American people through the implementation of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And I wanted to just take a moment to highlight some of our collective successes over the last couple of years as really an example of what we can accomplish through partnership and collaboration. Both Senator Carper and Senator Capito already spoke about the bipartisan infrastructure law, and deep appreciation to this committee for their leadership in getting that in place. Of the $50 billion that was dedicated to water infrastructure investment, EPA has awarded about $21 billion of those funds to states, tribes, and territories, and those resources are really working on behalf of local residents all across the country. Alongside the EPA, the infrastructure funding, we also developed a robust technical assistance program to do the very thing that you just spoke about, Senator Capito, to ensure that every community has a fair shot at receiving these funds. The Water TA program that was stood up over the last few years is now helping about 3,500 communities across the country in accessing these fundings. It's places like McDowell County, West Virginia, the Makah tribe in Washington State, with a real focus on building the technical, financial, and managerial capacity of these water systems. EPA also made progress on the regulatory front with a more protective lead and copper rule, establishing the first drinking water standard for PFAS, and other regulations. I'm certainly proud of all of our shared accomplishments, but we have so much more to do because our work will not be done until every single American has drinking water that is safe, reliable, and affordable. And so as we look to the future, I wanted to offer 5 priorities for our collective work. First, we must continue to invest in our nation's water infrastructure. EPA's recent drinking water needs survey found that in the United States, we have about a $384 billion need to invest in drinking water infrastructure over the next 20 years, not to mention the need on the clean water side. So we need more programs like the bipartisan infrastructure law. Second, we must modernize water management by rapidly accelerating the adoption of digital tools. You know, there are incredible technologies that exist right now to help improve water quality, water efficiency, and resilience. And the federal government has a really important role in raising awareness, providing technical assistance, and offering funding and incentives to help water utilities embrace these tools. Third, we must strengthen water management through equitable consolidation. There are over 50,000 water utilities in this country, and many of them struggle to meet regulatory requirements, manage costs, and maintain their infrastructure. Equitable consolidation can deliver real results for local residents if it's done well. Fourth, we have to adopt drinking water policy and investments to help communities weather what is increasingly called the water whiplash, this phenomena of shifts between extreme weather patterns, moving from severe droughts to intense floods and back again. There's a lot we can do on the policy side, flexible water use regulations, encouraging conservation practices, expanding water recycling that can help communities confront these challenges. Finally, across all that we do, we must improve outcomes for underserved and disadvantaged communities. Right now, 1 in 3 Americans struggle to pay water bills. What good is clean water if you can't afford to drink it? So we need to establish a permanent federal water assistance program to help struggling families. In closing, the Safe Drinking Water Act was an extraordinary accomplishment. It set the stage for decades of progress. And the clean and safe drinking water that so many Americans enjoy today would not have been possible if we acted by voluntary action by individual water utilities. It couldn't have been accomplished by communities and states working independently. We never could have developed and scaled a nationwide effort to test, protect, and improve our drinking water without the leadership and reach of the federal government. It's truly an example of the essential work of our federal government, what it can and must do to stand for our well-being. And so as we look back on the last half century and look forward to the next, I hope that will be our lesson and our goal. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today, and I look forward to the discussion.
We look forward to it as well. Thank you very much, Radhika. Thanks for all of your good work across the years. Delighted to see you again. I just want to say before, it's not every day that we get to welcome a president to our hearings, but this is an important subject. So, Mr. President, or do people ever call you Mr. President?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Okay. I think that would be like a great perk to have. Welcome, Mr. President. Thank you. Please proceed.
Yeah, Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito. Thank you.
Actually, believe it or not, she pronounces it Capito.
Capito.
Capito, yes.
Capito, okay.
I'm sure your name's been mispronounced a time or
Yes,
two as
plenty of times, except around Halloween, they're pretty good at it. So again, I just want to say thank you so much to the esteemed members of the committee as well to Yate. I'm Dr. Buu Nygren, Navajo Nation President. And the Navajo Nation is the largest Native American tribe in the U.S., spanning 17.5 million acres, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. We have over 400,000 enrolled members, half of residing on the reservation. Under the 1868 treaty, the United States had a legal and moral obligation to assist the Navajo Nation in addressing the challenges we face in safeguarding the well-being of our people. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on the 50th anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act, which has been vital for ensuring safe drinking water for many, many Navajo families on the nation. The act enabled the Navajo Nation to regulate its drinking water systems, marking a significant step for tribal sovereignty and self-determination. The Navajo Nation's efforts to ensure safe drinking water began when the establishment of the Public Water System Supervision Program in 1991. This program laid a strong foundation for regulating and monitoring water systems across the nation. Building on this progress, the Navajo Nation formally adopted the Navajo Nation Safe Drinking Water Act in 1995. This legislation was made to align with the federal regulations, ensuring that all drinking water systems on the Navajo Nation met rigorous safety and compliance standards. In December of 2000, the Navajo Nation became the first federally recognized tribe to obtain full authority for implementing the Safe Drinking Water Act. This historic milestone solidified the nation's authority to oversee and enforce safe drinking water regulations independently. Today, the PWSSP regulates 26 water purveyors responsible for 171 water systems, providing essential oversight to ensure clean and safe drinking water for approximately 169,000 of my tribal members across the Navajo Nation. The program continues adopting new regulations, ensuring that our water systems comply with evolving safety standards. This includes monitoring and reporting on over 90 contaminants and addressing emerging issues such as arsenic, disinfection by products, and PFAS. The Public Water System Supervision Program has shown remarkable leadership and innovation in advancing the Navajo Nation's access to safe drinking water. One of its key achievements is developing a formal construction review program, which ensures that all water system designs, new constructions, and safe system upgrades meet stringent safety and performance standards. This program guarantees that water infrastructure projects are built to last and serving the needs of the Navajo Nation's communities effectively. Additionally, the program has implemented an operator certificate program to uphold the quality and reliability of water system operations. By providing rigorous training and certifications for our operators, the program ensures that those managing water and wastewater systems have the expertise to address the challenges and maintain compliance with safety regulations. Collaboration has been central to the program's success. Through partnerships with the Indian Health Services, the EPA, the program has significantly reduced contamination levels in several Navajo communities, including Aneth, Montezuma Creek, and Greasewood Springs. These efforts involve the construction of water treatment plants, the extension of pipelines to bring clean water to areas that previously relied on less reliable sources, funding sources like the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act and the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, have been very instrumental in extending pipelines and upgrading infrastructure in the Navajo Nation. Despite progress in securing safe drinking water for the Navajo Nation, challenges do remain. Many communities still lack basic water infrastructure. Building pipelines across remote, rugged terrain is very costly and time-consuming, often hindering by logistical and financial constraints. Emerging contaminants like PFAS and PFOA require advanced monitoring and treatment and investments in technology. Additionally, transitioning to surface water systems to reduce groundwater reliance adds complexities, including staff training to meet regulatory standards. We deeply appreciate the support from Congress and federal agencies, which has been very essential in advancing safe drinking water efforts for our people. However, as demands on our water system grows, additional resources are urgently needed. We request restoring our annual grant funding for the Public Water System Supervision Program, which was last fully funded 11 years ago in 2014. With increases in costs since then, an updated funding level is critical to support enforcement, inspections, operator training, program sustainability. In closing, I urge Congress to continue supporting our tribal programs like the Navajo PWSSP and increase funding for critical infrastructure projects. Thank you for your time, your continued support, and I'm here for any questions that you may have on behalf of the Navajo Nation.
Good. Welcome, and again, thank you so much for joining us, for your leadership. Mr. President, and when is your birthday?
Christmas.
You're kidding.
It is on Christmas.
That is great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, nice you to join us, and thank you for your leadership, your input. Kathy, Tucker-Vogel, tell where are you from?
So good morning, Chairman Carper and Ranking Member Capito and members of the committee. I am from the great state of Kansas.
Mm.
I am the drinking water administrator at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, but I'm also here today representing the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators, whose 57 members represent the drinking water primacy agencies who work as co-regulators to protect public health through the implementation of the Safe Drinking Water Act.
All right, good. Well, welcome. We're delighted that you're here.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
So in Kansas, I direct the programs that implement the Safe Drinking Water Act with oversight of about 961 public water supply systems in the state of Kansas. Are all predominantly small and rural. And I oversee the approximately 2,000 water operators in the state of Kansas.
How many people live in Kansas these days?
Almost 3 million.
Okay.
So the 50th anniversary of CIDWA provides an opportunity for us to celebrate successes and identify approaches to meet our future challenges. The first national interim primary drinking water regulation, published in 1975, and I actually have an original copy here. Yes, an original copy of the Federal Register. It was 8.5 pages long and set maximum contaminant levels for 18 contaminants. So today, the most recent publication of 40 CFR Part 141, which are the drinking water regulations, consists of 343 pages and regulates over 90 contaminants. So you can see over the past 50 years, our workloads increased quite a bit. So primacy agencies and public water supply systems rely on 3 programs created in the 1996 amendments to the Safe Drinking Water Act. Those are the State Revolving Fund, which has been mentioned here today, and is the foundation for the implementation of our state drinking water programs. Since its inception in 1997, the SRFs have provided $57.3 billion in funding for water system improvements, and the SRFs have also provided $5.1 billion in additional subsidy through principal forgiveness on the loans, and many of these projects benefit small and rural communities. The second program I want to briefly review is the Capacity Development Program, which states have used to help small water systems achieve and maintain technical, financial, and managerial capacity, and has become an integral part of all state drinking water programs. And I just note that in addition, CIDWA prohibits awarding loans to water systems that do not demonstrate TFM capacity. And finally, the third program I wanted to highlight was the fact that Congress recognized that a well-trained and qualified workforce is necessary for water systems to ensure compliance with regulations. The operator certification program consists of training, examination, work experience, and continuing education requirements. And those 3 are really foundational to the operation of our drinking water programs. Implementation of CIDWA during the past 50 years has significantly improved public health protection. For example, the corrosion control requirements in the 1991 lead and copper rule have reduced exposure to lead from drinking water by 70%. One of the biggest challenges primacy agencies and public water supply systems face is the number and complexity of new and proposed drinking water regulations. I'll just hold this up again. In the past 3 years, EPA has published 4 final regulations and anticipates 3 more in 2025. Primacy agencies and water systems struggle to meet the implementation challenges of these new regulations impose on our programs. State primacy agencies really rely on 2 federal funding sources to operate their programs. That's the Public Water Supply Supervision Grants and the SRF set-asides. Since implementation of the congressionally directed spending in 2022, the base SRF capitalization grants have seen a 45% reduction, while the PWSS grant allocations have increased somewhat, about 16% over the last 20 years. This critical source of funding for state programs has not kept up with inflation and expanding program responsibilities. Other challenges for states and water systems include compliance with Buy America, Build America, Davis-Bacon, and American Iron and Steel. The IIJA restriction that only allows subsidies for disadvantaged communities, workforce shortages both at the state and local levels, and cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities. Although the challenges are many, with improved collaboration between EPA and states, combined with enhanced support from Congress, we can continue to protect the nation's drinking water. There are actions needed to ensure the achievements of CIDWA over the past 50 years will continue for the next 50. So congressional actions that we would recommend provide nationwide waivers for compliance with Build America, Buy America, Build America, American Iron and Steel, and Davis-Bacon requirements for public water supply systems serving a population less than 10,000. Allow SRF program flexibility to award additional subsidy to address compliance issues regardless of disadvantaged community status. Fully fund the SRF capitalization grants and fund congressionally directed spending from a source other than the SRF capitalization grants. Increase the annual PWSS grant appropriation to $200 million per year, and provide dedicated funding to address cybersecurity vulnerabilities. In closing, ASWA and its members are working very hard every day to ensure the provisions of the CIDWA are implemented in the most effective and efficient manner possible. On behalf of ASWA's members, I want to thank you for your continued investment in America's public water supply systems and the people they serve. You will find more details regarding my comments today in my written testimony, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And thank you for inviting me to speak today.
Thank you very much for joining us, for your testimony as well. Our thanks to each of our witnesses. Great to see you. Some of you have come a long way, and we're especially grateful for that. I believe that we can all agree, folks, probably everybody in this room, probably a lot of the people that are watching us across the country. I think that we can all agree that every American deserves access to clean, to safe, and reliable drinking water. And this hearing commemorates the 50th anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act, a piece of legislation that has enabled immense progress toward that goal and really helped to change the lives, improve the lives of so many people now and in the last 50 years. Would each of you share with us for a moment your perspective on the importance of the Safe Drinking Water Act for protecting public health, please? Radhika, please.
Yes, thank you, Senator Carper, for the question. I mean, I sort of said it in my opening remarks, is that CIDWA was a game changer. It was an absolute game changer because it established a national framework for testing, monitoring, and treating our drinking water. And as a result, now 91% of public water systems are delivering drinking water that meets all national standards. That's an incredible statistic. Now, we need to be at 100%, but the drinking water that Kathy, you and your fellow ASDA members are responsible for regulating, President Nygren, what you're doing on the Navajo Nation, I mean, it is because of a national framework that created uniform expectations that, we're still working to meet.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Another question, I think, for you, Ms. Fox. As our colleagues have heard me say time and time again, bipartisan solutions are lasting solutions. In fact, those first time I heard those words were from Rob Wallace, close friend of John Barrasso from Wyoming. And it was literally in this room. He was sitting right where you're sitting, Kathy, and he was there. He'd been nominated by President Trump for a senior position in the Department of the Interior. And he said during his testimony, these words, he said, bipartisan solutions are lasting solutions. That's what he said. Bipartisan solution. I think that's something we all agree with. And I think it's one of the secrets to our success in this committee. But Safe Drinking Water Act is no exception to that. From initial passage in 1974 all the way through passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law last Congress, all of the major legislation that Congress has passed to protect drinking water has been bipartisan. And I'm particularly proud of the bipartisan efforts of this committee, especially the leadership of Senator Capito, to pass drinking water infrastructure legislation. My question for you, Radhika, how has bipartisanship played a role in safe drinking water protections, and what do you see as a future opportunity going forward for bipartisanship in this regard?
Well, I feel that I just have to start by thanking this committee for really being a beacon of bipartisanship on water and environmental issues. It was an honor of a life to be able to work with all of you for 3 years. I do think that the successful bipartisan action this committee has taken on water also reflects the reality for community and for people. Water knows no political boundaries. If you have clean, safe water, you fuel the economy. If you don't, it is a barrier to prosperity. Interestingly, Senator Carper, just last night I was reading a roundup of various ballot measures at the local and state level that were about water and conservation, and they overwhelmingly were supported by voters from New York to Minnesota. And I think it's because people understand that there is nothing more essential to life than clean, safe water. And I just, again, want to thank the bipartisan action of this committee because it really has been a beacon of how we can get things done for the people of this nation.
All right. Thank you, Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you. And I think we are very much all aligned in terms of saying the value of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And as we look forward, so I'm going to take a little bit different tactic on my questions here, since I have expert panel in front of me. So I want to start with you, Ms. Tucker-Vogel. And then I mentioned this in my opening statement. Water systems often receive and encounter PFAS contaminants without producing or intentionally accepting or distributing them. Given the EPA's proposed PFAS designation under CERCLA, what would the impact be for water systems and consumers of the potential liability that this could place on local utilities that bear no responsibilities? I mean, you said you had 900 separate systems. That you've got to be obviously anticipating and thinking about this. So what is your perspective on the passive receiver issue?
So if you look at the memo from EPA on their discretion on enforcement for PFAS under CERCLA, it does exempt community water systems. However, shouldn't say exempt. It says they will use discretion on enforcement at community water systems. However, it does not mention non-community water systems, non-transient, non-community, which are schools, those non-residential water systems that serve the same people every day. So the big one that comes to mind are schools. And so we would want to make sure that schools are also included in that discretionary enforcement. Water systems under the new PFAS rule will have to comply. So if they do have PFAS in their water, they will have to install treatment in order to be compliant with the new regulation. So funding will be a big problem. Now, we've done some preliminary sampling in the state of Kansas, and we're fortunate that we've only identified so far about 3 or 4 systems that have detections. We have one system, which is a military base, Fort Leavenworth, who has installed treatment. Of course, that's a federal government responsibility, so that doesn't really impact our small systems. But they'll be very challenged if we have to start installing this expensive treatment for PFAS removal.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is a source of concern, I think, as we move forward. So Radhika Fox, thank you. Good to see you. Thank you for the nice compliments, and I hope you're doing well in the private sector, as you've devoted 3 years to us and to your country. So thank you for that. But while I have you here, I'm going to ask you a question about something that occurred while you were in your capacity. On the safe, you know that this safe drinking level, this maximum contaminant level, was something that I was pushing constantly for. Set a level that we can understand, measure, and be safe with. But the Science Advisory Board was sort of questioned the processes that for setting those levels. They identified major flaws in the EPA's approach, like inconsistent inclusion and exclusion of epidemiology and animal studies, lack of predefined protocol, insufficient transparency. So what would your response be to that? And how can we improve upon, A, the processes, but also make this MCL level workable for the systems that Ms. Tucker-Vogel talked about, and also the president of the Navajo Nation is going to have to deal with this as well. Microphone.
Sorry about that. Rusty. So, what I recall so one thing I will say, Senator Capito, having been at the EPA for 3 years, I absolutely agreed. And I think, Kathy, you would probably agree with this too. There are vast improvements we can make to the regulatory development process, creating greater efficiency, transparency. So from a process perspective, I absolutely agree with you. On the question of the process that EPA went through to set the level at 4 parts per trillion. What I recall is that was very much that was a recommendation that was made by the career staff experts who had reviewed hundreds of studies. And we arrived at the 4 parts per trillion because some of the more recent studies from when states had set MCLs showed that PFAS clearly causes cancer. And that is what really led to the decision to set at 4 parts per trillion.
So you don't really have a response to what the Science Advisory Board, the questions that they raised on the setting of this level?
I believe that there was robust discussion between the staff who were managing the development of that regulation and the Science Advisory Board.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have to go to my other committee, so thank you all very much. Thank you.
And thank you for this morning. Thank you very much.
Well, I was going to do a big thank you to you, and I feel sort of bad I haven't, but I'm planning one. And, and it's going to be big. But I did name the bill after you and other things, but I didn't want anybody who was listening to this think that I, as the ranking member, do not have great appreciation and admiration for not just our working relationship, but our personal relationship with you as all. Both our native West Virginia roots, I think, have tied us together very, very early, very long. So I thank you for that. And you're just going to be amazed at what I'm going to say later on. And
You'll get as much time as you
and
need.
it is my 48th wedding anniversary
Today?
Yes, thank you.
No, really? Congratulations. That's
Poor
wonderful.
Charlie.
Tell him we said thanks for sharing you with all of us. Thanks, and thanks for your kind words. See you soon. All right. I think next is Senator Padilla. Senator Padilla, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate you holding this hearing to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is a bedrock environmental law ensuring safe and clean drinking water for all Americans. Mr. Chairman, earlier you referenced the right to clean water, safe water, and reliable water. I also want to add affordable water to that list of important criteria. In the very first hearing that I held as chair of the subcommittee on fisheries, water, and wildlife, we examined the challenges of water affordability, especially for small, rural, and tribal water systems. Now, unlike a lot of other types of infrastructure projects that receive federal funding, drinking water infrastructure is primarily funded by ratepayers. That's become the case. In fact, over 90% of a typical water utility's revenue comes directly from customer payments. But as drinking water systems face $625 billion in infrastructure needs over the next 20 years, what does this mean for working families, the working families that we represent, working families across the country? It means that many communities are facing water bills that are rising even faster than inflation overall. My first question for Ms. Fox: I appreciated your testimony on the importance of establishing a permanent water assistance program to help struggling families pay their water bills. That's why I introduced legislation to establish the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program. Can you speak more about why a national permanent assistance program for water is so critical?
First of all, thank you for your leadership, Senator Padilla, on this issue of water affordability. As I said in my opening remarks, 1 in 3 Americans struggle with the price of their water bills. And if you think about the fact that ongoing investment is going to be needed in water infrastructure, this issue of affordability is only going to increase. It was quite incredible that Congress established the LIWAP program, and that has helped hundreds of thousands of families be able to address, arrearages and water affordability costs. But more is needed. We need a permanent water affordability program, and I'm very hopeful that this next Congress will sort of pick up the mantle of your important legislation and get it to the finish line.
Thank you. And a related note, the increased cost is not just for the replacement of some aging infrastructure, the expansion to add capacity. It's not just pipes, it's not just pumps, it's not just new treatment that is needed to meet important safety standards, but ongoing operation and maintenance costs are something that is not often considered, but it's important to do so. So again, this milestone, this hearing presents an opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to resilient water infrastructure. And the bipartisan infrastructure law should play a historic and pivotal role in helping us address some of these deferred maintenance needs, but the operational and maintenance costs is so critical to sustaining these systems, but often receives insufficient attention and funding. So given, Ms. Fox, that the incoming administration has already signaled that they plan to rescind unspent funds from major multi-year investments, can you speak to the importance of continued and focused investments in our nation's water infrastructure, particularly for ensuring the long-term sustainability of these systems?
Absolutely. If you look, Senator, at any of the mega trends in water, what we know is everywhere is becoming more water insecure. Scarcity is an issue. Making sure that our water systems are fortified in the face of more uncertain weather patterns. So it is absolutely a time to really double down on investment in water infrastructure. What I can say about the bipartisan infrastructure law, $21 billion is already out from EPA to states, tribes, and territories, like my fellow witnesses. That money is being put to work in over 1,200 local water infrastructure projects in every state across this country. Every American is really going to be benefiting from this. So I certainly hope that the incoming administration will continue to invest the second half of that bipartisan infrastructure law funding, as well as work in a bipartisan fashion with Congress to continue to sustain those investments. And Senator, I really see the infrastructure dollars and the permanent water affordability program as two sides of a coin that really can deliver clean, safe water for the American people.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, just in closing, want to remind the members of the committee that we had this hearing and the conversations we've had since are truly bipartisan. If you look at the rural communities that I referenced earlier, the lower income communities, the tribal communities throughout the country, it's not blue states, it's not red states, it's truly all of us. This is an area where there should be significant bipartisan agreement. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you as well. Before I turn to Senator Records, I just want to say a word of thanks to both of you for your faithful attendance. We were preceded here by Barbara Boxer, and my guess is if you choose to continue to do this line of work for the years to come, and I hope you will, that you may end up sitting in this seat. And if you don't, you'll have to share it with this guy right here, because nobody is more faithful in attendance than him. Senator Ricketts, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for your work here on this committee. It's been a pleasure serving on this committee with you, so thank you for what you've done. And thank you to the witnesses who have come here today to share their experiences. Together, we celebrate the contributions of water utilities across the nation and their work to ensure access to safe drinking water. And we should celebrate safety. We should also expect to celebrate transparent and constitutional water regulations under both the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. Sadly, starting with the Obama administration and now with the Biden administration, the EPA has pursued implementing the unconstitutional Waters of the U.S., Waters of the United States rule, otherwise known as WOTUS rule. Put forward originally by the Obama administration and now by the Biden administration, this rule was predictably illegal. The Biden administration's pursuit of it has only hurt Americans. The legal ambiguity around the Biden WOTUS rule acutely impacts Nebraskans. Nebraska's economy is deeply tied to agriculture. It's about 20% of our state's economy. About 1 in 4 jobs are tied to agriculture in Nebraska. About 92% of our land area in Nebraska is dedicated to agriculture. Our farmers and ranchers are the original conservationists. They would protect the land, the animal, the water, because they want to pass that land on to the next generation. We've got farmers and ranchers who are third, fourth, fifth, sixth generation, and they depend on protecting those natural resources. They are stewards of the land that know their livelihoods and their families' livelihoods are tied to the health of the land and water they tend. And they tend to the land. Nebraskans depend to tend on the land. The Nebraskans depend on the federal government to give them clear and transparent guidance. The Biden-WOTUS rule was the opposite of what Nebraskans needed. It didn't have to be so problematic. Congress gave the EPA clear definitions of intent. The 1972 Clean Water Act established navigable waters as waters of the United States. The 1972 Clean Water Act says navigable waters 50 times. Congress's intent could not have been more clear on what it was. It was very clear that this is what the EPA had authority to regulate. Now, I'm a biology major, not a sailor. But it seems to me the plain water definition of navigable is that you can put a boat on it and you can go someplace. Oh, let's look. Guess what? Merriam-Webster agrees with me. What does Merriam-Webster say? Deep enough and wide enough to afford passage of ships. Guess who also agrees? The Supreme Court. The Supreme Court unanimously ruled that the Biden administration exceeded its authority under the Clean Water Act, all 9 justices. When the court is unanimous, I question if the EPA understands the Clean Water Act. Or maybe the EPA just does not care what the Clean Water Act boundaries are. Either explanation is embarrassing. Sadly, the damage of this rule did not stop at the Supreme Court decision. The EPA failed to issue clear implementation of guidelines after the illegal rule was struck down. Farmers and ranchers have to guess how to comply with the EPA. These guidelines are critical. Violation of the Clean Water Act can carry penalties of up to $64,000 a day. This ongoing regulatory confusion doesn't just undermine trust in our institutions, it jeopardizes the ability of hardworking Americans to pay their bills, feed their children, and care for the land and water that they have. And they love this land. Waters of the U.S. is just one example of how the Biden administration created regulatory uncertainty. Biden's EPA created similar issues with other rules under the Safe Drinking Water Act. They've added costly regulatory burdens for rural and urban water systems impacting Nebraska households. I am looking forward to a change in leadership at the EPA soon. New leadership will give farmers and ranchers, manufacturers and landowners a transparent and legal regulatory framework. And new leadership will increase Americans' access to clean, safe, and affordable drinking water. Again, I can't look forward to having new leadership at the EPA soon enough, given the regulatory uncertainty that this EPA has created. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you as well. Question, Radhika, for you, but many of us are still grappling with the results of last month's elections, including what it means for environmental and public health protections going forward. Now more than ever, it's important to remain vigilant about protecting progress that we're making toward clean drinking water. Ms. Fox, would you please describe what you will be watching out for during the next administration in terms of drinking water protections? And are there potential policy actions that the Trump administration might take that concern you? Go ahead.
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. I think, as has been a theme of this hearing, the issue of clean, safe water, it knows no political boundaries. And this committee has been a shining example of taking bipartisan action to ensure that every American has access to clean, safe water. And I certainly hope that the next administration, the Trump administration, will continue the work, and that the next Congress will continue that work. I think, if you look at, for example, Senator Carper, the issue of PFAS, this is an area where you and Senator Capito have worked hand in hand on the issue, because PFAS affects communities all around the country. The PFAS drinking water standard that was established during the Biden administration really was initiated during the Trump administration. And so, while I certainly would expect that they'll be taking a look at the regulation, I certainly am hopeful that this is some protection from PFAS is going to be important for the American people. Same thing with the lead and copper rule. The Trump administration established the lead and copper rule that the Biden administration built on. So again, I'm hopeful here that even as refinements are made, that these protections are maintained.
All right, thank you for that. This will be a question for each of you, and we'll start, if you will, with Ms. Vogel. Based on all of your testimony, it's clear that sustained federal support is critical to build and rebuild our nation's drinking water infrastructure. The bipartisan infrastructure law that a number of us in this committee worked very hard on, and our staffs, has enabled us to make, we believe, considerable progress. But we've also heard about ongoing challenges that remained unaddressed. I've long said that the bipartisan infrastructure law was a down payment on safe drinking water, and Congress will need to take more actions to protect that investment. Looking forward, I'm going to ask each of you to summarize the key considerations for Congress to protect safe drinking water, and what should be in a potential future supplemental funding package for drinking water infrastructure. And where do you see agreement with your fellow witnesses? Ms. Tucker-Vogel, do you want to lead off with that? And then we'll go to the president and then back to Radhika. Go ahead.
Well, if you go back to my comments about things that, from a state drinking water agency perspective, and the fact that drinking water touches everyone every day in every community. And it's the primary public health protection measure that we can provide to our citizens. So as far as congressional actions, the Buy America, Build America, American Iron and Steel, and Davis-Bacon are really a burden on especially the small water systems that we are primarily talking about and are primarily exist in the state of Kansas. So providing some relief, maybe some waivers for those serving less than 10,000 would be very beneficial and allow those small systems to take advantage of the SRF program and the other grant programs, the emerging contaminants for small and disadvantaged communities, and the grants for small, underserved, and disadvantaged communities, which are outside of the SRF programs, but still very important funding to help these small communities, and allow the SRF programs some flexibility in awarding the additional subsidy grants, principal forgiveness in the SRF program, so that a water system that may be having compliance issues, say with nitrates. Kansas, we are seeing a real uptick in nitrate contamination. So they may not be a disadvantaged community at the point they're making the loan application. But if you start talking about a $3.5 million nitrate removal treatment plant, the cost of installing that treatment plant could very well tip them over the edge into being a disadvantaged community, just by simply the operational costs and the water rates that would have to go along with that to repay the loan. So providing states some flexibility on how we assign additional subsidy would be very helpful as well.
Good. We've been rejoined by Senator Kelly, and while he takes his seat, Mr. President, we'll come back to you, President Nygren. We'll come back to you once Senator Kelly's had an opportunity to get settled in and ask his question. And then same question of Radhika. And I'll just restate that question. Actually, two questions are related. I'm going to ask each of you to address this. Looking forward, would you please summarize the key considerations for Congress to protect safe drinking water? And what should be in a potential supplemental funding package for drinking water infrastructure? Where do you see agreement with your fellow witnesses? We'll come back once he's asked his question. Senator Kelly, thanks for rejoining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Nygren, thanks again for joining us today. I wanted to ask you to expand upon your testimony where you discuss the importance of making sure that tribal communities receive not just funding for physically building infrastructure, but also for staff and training and workforce development to make sure tribes can operate and maintain drinking water systems. So first, can you expand upon what you said during your opening remarks to explain what types of funding the Navajo Nation has received in prior years to administer drinking water programs? So I'm talking about previous years. What were the types of funding that the nation received?
Thank you, Senator. As mentioned in my testimony, we currently received the Public Water System Supervision Grant, and we feel like it hasn't been fully funded since 2014. I've been told that it's about half funded since then, and really to continue to roll out the Safe Drinking Water Act to make sure that that program is funded. We'd really appreciate that. The other funding that we've gotten to is the Source Water Protection Grant. I'm told that was about 200,000, around that number that we've received to try to provide some quality source water prevention for contamination as well too. And then the other grant that we received is to make sure that these grants continue to work together in partnership to have us continue to implement these grants. But sometimes the resources and the dollars we get are not quite enough. And the vastness of the Navajo Nation, we've got, as I mentioned earlier, about the size of West Virginia, 2.5 times the size of Massachusetts. And really to implement the resources that are needed, we got to make sure that we've got our personnel to be out in the community testing, whether it's well water, testing existing water systems that haven't been looked at in a long time. So again, the funding that we get, we really hope that we can get it fully funded and to make sure that we meet those demands.
Even when it's fully funded, you feel like it's still an insufficient amount of money to do the work you need. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. As I was talking with our EPA team, that they haven't gone out and evaluated some of the groundwater systems that have like windmills that a lot of our people continue to use. Having grown up 19 years, I grew up on well water, and the discussions I had with EPA was, I wonder if the well water that I drank out of for 19 years, I wonder if it was ever tested. And so a lot of communities still use well water, spring water. Some of the spring waters on Navajo, they have had traces of uranium, but sometimes communities just need to drink water to satisfy their thirst. So again, I think that if we were fully resourced above and beyond what we are requesting at the moment, it'd really help us, because there's still 30% of the population that still don't have access to clean, reliable drinking water, because most of them have to haul the water miles and miles at a time.
Yeah, I have a staff member who works for me in state that has to, and who has to haul water every week. It varies. Well, the frequency varies based on the time of year and how much water people tend to use. Can you talk a little bit about staffing capacity and how the funds that we provide, help you administer, these programs, and why this is so important to tribal communities?
I think when it comes to the staffing, we are definitely using the dollars that we can get. But again, we staff them with as many people as we can possibly can. But as I mentioned earlier, we've got some personnel that continue to try to monitor as much as they can. But as far as the other resources that we've received, I know it's like the ARPA money, the bipartisan infrastructure dollars, especially with the Gallup water supply and trying to complete some of those resources. We've really been trying to implement a lot of those, working with our Navajo Tribal Utility Authority. Some of the bipartisan money that has come down from Congress, we've continued to connect people to water on a month-to-month basis. But again, that's just using existing water sources. And I know at the moment you're championing one of our biggest water rights settlement at the time. But to really continue to build that out, we really need to have a really good idea of how much water we're going to have as we continue to build out some of those clean water efforts.
If you know, how many families are getting access via, piped water to their homes on average each month?
On average, I think the number that I recently got a month ago is over the past year, we've connected about, I think it was about 700 homes over the past year. So again, if you divide that, it's probably, I'm not as quick as you as math.
60 something.
60 something a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you, Mr. President, in a second. But Ms. Fox, can you describe what ways that the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Biden administration worked to provide additional capacity building assistance to help tribal communities?
Absolutely. So during my time at the EPA, we established the first ever Tribal Water Action Plan, which was the Biden administration's commitment to strengthen the nation-to-nation relationship with tribes, through the implementation of the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. And that Tribal Water Action Plan included several things. One was to invest more in technical assistance to support tribes. And I talked about some of that technical assistance work earlier. There was also a commitment to help an additional 100 tribes get a treatment estate so that they could also be setting their and managing their water regulations. And then there were several rulemakings that were really focused on better aligning the implementation of the Clean Water Act with tribal treaty rights. So of course, there's more work to be done, but those were some examples of efforts that we partook in.
Can you think of additional resources you might need or additional authorities that the EPA could benefit from to help tribal communities meeting their drinking water needs?
I would absolutely agree with the recommendations that the president has already made. I think that we have well-established programs for technical assistance, for infrastructure, and we really just need to continue resourcing them so that we can reach more communities.
I think I'm a little bit over my time, but I just got one suggestion for President Nygren. When you come back to the committee, and the chair will be Senator Capito from West Virginia. I often talk about the Navajo Nation not being twice the size of Massachusetts, but being almost as big as West Virginia.
Mhm.
Just for your information.
Okay.
And with that, turn it back over to Mr. Chairman.
Well, as a native of West Virginia, I would just say almost heaven, West Virginia. Thank you, Senator Kelly. Thanks. You've been a great member of this committee, and it's been just an honor to have served with you in the Navy. We're probably the only committee in the Congress where you got two retired Navy captains serving on the same committee in lockstep with a bunch of Republicans and Democrats. Thank you so much. That's true. That's true. I served when they had wooden ships and cannons. There you go. All right. Thanks, pal. Before we wrap it up, I just say let's go back to the last question I think we heard from you, Ms. Vogel, and President Nygren. I'd like to hear from you and Radhika on the last question, please.
Thank you. I believe that one of the things I think about when it comes to how do we continue to promote the Drinking Water Act and the Clean Drinking Water Act is to make sure that that as we continue to fund our efforts, as I mentioned earlier, the Navajo Nation still has thousands and thousands of people without running water and access to clean drinking water. So to continue to have that support from Congress, to continue to have that support from the EPA, from the Department of Interior, IHS, as we continue to partner to make sure that we continue to deploy our efforts to bring water to families every week And one of the things I also think about too is to make sure that some efforts on trying to secure water rights. That's one of the biggest initiatives that we have on behalf of the Navajo Nation, is that we've secured some water rights in the San Juan River on the New Mexico side, the Utah water rights as well. But on the Arizona, we're still continuing to fight, because Arizona actually is 60% of the Navajo Nation, and we haven't secured our water rights for 60% of the nation as well. So that fight, I think that if we can continue to get that accomplished and really have a future that the Navajo Nation can plan around, that would be amazing to see. Because as I mentioned in my testimony, bringing water on the Navajo Nation, you've got rough terrain, you've got rocks, you need trenchers to try to go through the rock to bring water to some of the western part of the Navajo Nation. So again, there's a lot of its challenges, but if we can continue to make sure that we can secure our water rights, that would actually help us tremendously.
Good. Thank you for that.
So, Senator, I just want to appreciate you for this hearing, to take a moment to kind of reflect on our progress, because I think so often when we do this work, we're thinking about what's next. What are the challenges that we haven't dealt with yet? But if you think about it, 50 years ago, Safe Drinking Water Act, 52 years ago, we had the Clean Water Act, right? Two incredibly important canons of environmental regulation. And we've gone from human waste in our drinking water. We've gone from rivers on fire because there was so much pollution, to really, really incredible progress for the American people because of what this body, Congress, did, right, for the American people. And then I think about, under your leadership, Senator Capito's leadership, we got $50 billion. So another 50, right? At $50 billion in funding for water infrastructure, which is really setting the stage for the next 50 years of progress. I think we just have to keep going, continue, we don't always get the policy right. We don't ever have all the money that we need, but over the last 4 years, we really made progress. And I think it's time to just keep going, because when we bet on water, America wins.
Oh, I like that. Let me just ask one last question, and that is, is there any, sometimes I ask this question, any question you wish you'd been asked today, but you weren't? And then if there is one, give us the question and your answer. Please go ahead. So
I didn't quite hear what
yeah,
you said.
at the, sometimes I like to say to the witnesses, especially when we have a lot of concurrence here, a lot of agreement, if there's any question that you wish you had been asked, but
Any
were not
question
asked.
I wished I had been asked?
Yeah. So you could, you don't get this very often, but you have a
So-
chance to ask a question and answer that question.
So one of the things I touched on briefly were workforce issues. And I think it's very important to recognize we have workforce challenges not only at water systems with the graying of our water operators, if you will. Many of them are retiring, and the younger folks aren't really interested in working in a public water supply system where you're on call 24/7, 365 days out of the year. Salaries are low. We have those same problems with state agencies and people that provide the assistance to those water systems. So looking at ways to perhaps support workforce issues, to help grow the workforce, to make being a water operator an attractive career for folks coming out of college. I'll just give you a couple examples. What we've done in Kansas, our junior colleges, community colleges, are going directly to high schools, trying to get high school seniors that may not be interested in going to college into the water sector work. The National Rural Water Association has an apprenticeship program. Kansas has done, I believe, about 19 water operators have gone through the apprenticeship program in the last 3 to 4 years. 9 of them have successfully passed their water operator examinations and are now out working in our small communities. So those kinds of efforts to shore up workforce issues and provide some support to expand our workforce issues efforts, I think would be very helpful.
That's good. I was privileged to serve as governor of Delaware for 8 years and chaired the National Governors Association for some of those years. There's the NGA has something called Center for Best Practices. Center for Best Practices, and it's a clearinghouse for ideas that maybe come out of Kansas, can come out of West Virginia, come out of Delaware, and we just share them across geographical lines and state lines, but also just the ideas to figure out what works and do more of that, and to make it easier to share those ideas. And what you've just shared with us is just another example of that. The President Nygren, do people ever mispronounce your name?
Boo?
No, your last name.
Oh, Nygren.
Good, I got it. All right. All right, Mr. President, go ahead. Closing statement, anything you wish had been asked but have not been.
I think I can agree with Kathy. I'm glad that she brought that up, because workforce development on the nation, especially with the aging workforce and trying to continue to entice high school students to really pursue their trades and to give every opportunity so that we can have a lot more people working out in the skilled labor force is really definitely needed, not only there, but here on the Navajo Nation as well. So I'm definitely glad that question was brought up. And overall, I'm just very happy that this committee, as mentioned by everyone on this panel today, is just, we're very appreciative that this is a bipartisan support to try to get water to every American. And I appreciate your leadership. And thank you so much, Mr. Carper.
Thank you, sir. And the
Well-
people say, what do you
What do I-
remember? No, people in the future will say, what do you most remember about chairing the Committee on Environment and Public Works? And I'll say, the last hearing that I chaired. And they say, why is that? I said, the president was there. All right, Radhika.
Well, so as you know, Senator, I've been asked lots and lots of questions by this committee over the last several
Yes, you
years.
have.
I think the question that I wish I was asked is, what is your favorite quality when it comes to Senator Carper? And I would say it's your heart.
Thank you.
And I want to close with the story, which is, back in
Remember, this is a PG audience.
yes. Back in June of 2021, when I was confirmed by the Senate, I was sitting in my home, and it was in the evening, and a phone number I didn't recognize showed up on my cell phone, and it was Senator Carper. He was on the train home to Delaware, and he called just to say, congratulations, and I expect you to do good stuff. And then he said, because he had met my husband at my confirmation hearing, he said, is your husband there? And so I went and got my husband, and Senator Carper said, thank you for sharing your wife with the country. And then he remembered that my dad had come out during COVID to the confirmation hearing. It was the first time I had seen my dad in months and months because of COVID. And he said, is your dad there? And I said, no, my dad lives somewhere else. He said, can you conference him in? And then, I conferenced my dad in, and Senator Carper, I was like, Dad, Senator Carper is on the line for you. And he's like, what? And you just were so kind to my father, who, as you know, was an immigrant, came to this country from rural India, you remember that story about my father, that, he lived in a small village without running water, and that his daughter became the first woman of color to run the water program for the country. And you remembered that. And so, Senator Carper, I just want to thank you for your service, for always doing this work of policy from a place thinking about people, and with such a good heart. Thank you.
Yeah, you're kind to say that. Thank you very, very much for that. Speaking of spouses and parents, one of a real war hero, Senator Kelly and I spent a lot of years in uniform in the Navy, but we back in World War II, especially, there were a bunch of true heroes. And one of those was Bob Dole, who ended up from Kansas, you may recall, as a senator here, and a leader, ran for president, and was extraordinary career. His wife, Liddy, was nominated to serve in a position that required Senate confirmation. And it's a great story. And I don't know if they were in this room at this table, But there's a tradition when the people are nominated for Senate confirmable positions that their home state senator might come and introduce them to the colleagues of the committee. And the story, it's a true story, that when Elizabeth Dole came for a confirmation hearing before the appropriate Senate committee, her husband sat next to her to introduce her. And he said these words to his Senate colleagues, Robert Dole, they were his words. He said, I regret that I have one wife to give for my country. I regret that I have one wife to give for my country. And he's passed on and left a great legacy here. She's still alive and cooking and doing a whole lot of great stuff with her life. But remembers to your family, especially your husband. One of a lot of times members of the committee and my colleagues and I get thanked for our service and for what we do. People have been very kind to Ben Cardin and me and others through Debbie Stabenow, who's stepping down at the end of this year. But I've been doing a number of interviews, like looking back, legacy kind of interviews, which are interesting and fun. But people ask me, what is my secret to success? And I always say, my sister and I picked the right parents. Picked the right parents. And not a lot of money, but good values and deep faith and hard work. And a real love for this planet, the idea that we have a moral obligation to protect this creation that we all call home, this planet Earth. And I think that's something that goes across party lines in this committee, and it's a good thing. One story, I've said it, and I've even said it today, but I want to say it again. It's one of my favorite experiences. The people say to me, "What do you most remember?" And you're 24 years, and I said, "I remember the night we were up all night on debating the Inflation Reduction Act, which actually has a lot of clean energy provisions in it that deal with water and with air and so forth." But we were debating up until, gosh, the wee hours of the morning, that legislation and the Inflation Reduction Act. We finally voted about I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning, and passed with one vote. The Vice President Kamala Harris came out and she presided over the Senate for the last vote, and it was 50 votes. She broke the tie, and I spoke to her after when the place went crazy, and people celebrating, a lot of crying, for different reasons on the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. But it is the law of our land, and I think we're finding that it's actually something that we can live with and do well, create a lot of jobs for across the country. But I go back and forth on the train a lot, like Joe Biden used to do. But that morning, I caught a train at about 6 o'clock back to Delaware. We were finished in the Senate. I caught a train and headed back and got off in Wilmington. I don't know if how many of you have, like, in your state, Wawas, but we have them all up and down the East Coast. I love Wawa, and so those of you who are familiar with them probably love it too. But anyway, rather than driving home, it was about 7:30 in the morning. I was dead tired, but rather than driving home, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee at Wawa, and I did, and got a small cup of coffee, and I went to the cashier to pay for it, and she knows I go there a fair amount. She knew who I was and was very kind. She said, I had a small cup. She said, "Your money is no good here for a small cup of coffee." That's what she said. Isn't that nice? "Your money is no good here for a small cup of coffee." And I said, "Could I get a larger cup of coffee?" And she said, "No. Your money is no good here for a small cup of coffee." But then she went on to say this word. She said, "You've been up all night, haven't you?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, with my colleagues." And she said, "And I know what you've been doing." And she went on to say, she said, "I have a son and a daughter. and I want to make sure that they have a planet to grow up on and a planet to grow old on. Think about that. A planet to grow up on and a planet to grow old on. And she said, I know that's what you've been working on. And I said, well, I want to make sure they have a planet to go up on and grow old on, and hope someday that my wife and I, we have several sons, but we hope someday to have some grandchildren. We want to make sure that they have a planet to grow up on and to grow old on. But I also want to make sure, I said this to the lady that morning, I said, I also want to make sure that your kids and everybody's kids have not just a planet to grow up on. I want to make sure they have jobs, that they can support themselves and their families. And that as it turns out, we can do both. And for as long as I've been in this committee, 24 years, that's what we've been doing, trying to make sure that we do have a planet to grow up on and grow old on for those that follow us, but also to make sure that the economy of this country remains vibrant, and it is, to make sure it continues to produce jobs at an incredible pace going off and forward into the future. Let me say to our staff members that are those on the Republican side that work under the leadership of Senator Capito, who has been a wonderful colleague and partner on so many different things, including today. To express my sympathy, express my sympathy that you have to put up with guys like me from time to time, but to express my thanks for our staff members that are here over my right shoulder. I don't see Adam. Adam who's their leader on the staff side. To tell him that some nice things were said about him in his absence, and to folks on my left here, led by, in part by Elizabeth Grace, and also by I call it by Courtney. Our thanks to all of you, and to members of my colleague who have been great collaborators for good. It's been a joy, and I look forward to coming back and visiting from time to time. And with that, final housekeeping. I want to again thank our witnesses for your time and for your testimony, for what you do with your lives. Ensuring access to clean drinking water has been a priority for me throughout my career since I was little. My sister and I, little kids, lived alongside the Beaver Creek outside of Beckley, West Virginia, a creek that was so polluted you couldn't drink it, you couldn't eat the fish out of that creek. But my training as somebody who cares about the environment started right there as a little boy. And while the bipartisan infrastructure law is enabling considerable progress toward meeting our nation's drinking water infrastructure needs, there are still major challenges and opportunities that the Congress needs to address and must address. Today, we're able to learn about some of those challenges and consider what communities will need going forward to ensure that all Americans have access to clean drinking water. We heard, I think, important perspectives today, and there are many more perspectives that can and should inform this important discussion. And to that end, I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record letters from a variety of stakeholders that relate to today's hearing. And so I would ask unanimous consent for that. Hearing no objection. That's my favorite part. One of my favorite things I do as a chair. I wait till none of my colleagues are here, and then I make unanimous consent requests. I could ask for the moon. There's nobody here to object, but I haven't gotten in any trouble yet. So hopefully I'll escape today as well. Some final housekeeping. Senators will be allowed to submit questions for the record through the close of business on December 4th, and we'll compile those questions. We'll send them to each of you, and we're going to ask you to respond to us by December 18th. Anything else? Anything else? No. With that, it's a wrap, and this hearing is adjourned. Thank you all.